Hello, everybody. This is Dan Hermrich with NADSP, and I'm here with Tanya Fritz from Black Hills Works in Rapid City, South Dakota.
Hello, everyone.
And we are here today to talk about a topic that we do get a lot of questions about. NADSP has two different ways to earn a national certification as a direct support professional. And we're going to talk about those two different paths to certification and kind of compare and contrast them and help you understand the differences between the two so that if you're perhaps making a decision about which path is best for you or your organization, that you'll have some information to help you make that decision. So both of these models of certification, anytime we're looking at certifying a direct support professional, we go back to this quote from the founder of NADSP, John F. Kennedy Jr., who in 1996 wrote in a report to President Clinton that quality is defined at the point of interaction between the staff member and the individual with a disability. And we truly believe that at NADSP. Therefore, when we are evaluating a direct support professional and making a determination about whether they have met the standards for national certification, that's the approach we take. We try our best to evaluate their work at that point of interaction, the work they're actually doing with the people that they support. And we have a way to do that through a portfolio-based process that we'll talk about. That was the original certification program. We also have this wonderful new E-Badge Academy that still, although it's very different, focuses on what happens at that point of interaction. And if you've gone to any sort of NADSP training, if you've viewed any of our other webinars, that you've seen this before, this Venn diagram. This is another thing that we truly believe at NADSP, that to provide that quality support at that point of interaction, there are three components that are absolutely necessary, and those are knowledge, skills, and values. DSPs need to have access to training, good high-quality training that's based on sound research, and probably training above and beyond what's mandatory, to meet the regulations in your particular location, in your particular jurisdiction. They need to have skills. They need to have the ability to use that knowledge on the job, to apply that knowledge and use it to help people live a better life. And then we have our NADSP Code of Ethics that we feel like really explains the values of this profession. And certainly this is a profession where values are very, very important, where it can be very easy to substitute your own opinion or your own decision for that of a person that you're supporting. And we need to have a strong ethical foundation to keep us from going that route. All right, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this version of credentialing because this is the original version that we ended in 2013. But this is how we got started. We got started with a program that had three levels called DSP Registered, DSP Certified, and DSP Specialist. DSP Registered was very, very popular. There was no portfolio required. We did require a letter of professional commitment. We required a commitment to our Code of Ethics. We required 6 months of experience on the job. But there was no portfolio required. The portfolio came in at the next level, the DSP Certified level. And at that time, it was a fairly substantial portfolio. All 8 work samples had to be completed all at once and submitted together. And that was a whole lot of work. And at that time, we didn't have very many people moving up from DSP Registered to DSP Certified because it was such a big jump in terms of the requirements. And then, of course, we had the specialty level that allowed DSPs to specialize in an area like inclusion or employment support or positive behavior support. So in 2013, we made a decision that DSP certified level really was a little too overwhelming, and we cut it in half. We cut it up into two smaller levels called Certified Initial and Certified Advanced. We started calling these levels DSP 1 and DSP 2, and we called the specialty level DSP 3. So that registered level still existed, but now the next step after registered was to do a portfolio with 4 work samples, which was still pretty significant, but not quite as overwhelming and intimidating as requiring 8 work samples from the very beginning. So we continue to offer that version of the program. That still exists. You can send in your portfolios and pay the application fee, and NADSP will evaluate them. And if the requirements for certification are met, that's absolutely a path that you can follow to national certification. And then in January of this year, we launched this new program, the NADSP E-Badge Academy. About 10 years into the certification program, we had a meeting, and we talked about, that we really wanted to reach more DSPs than we were reaching with the portfolio-based program. That portfolio process, even when it was 4 work samples, was probably about a year-long process, and it was still a little bit overwhelming and I think intimidating for DSPs. We did some estimation, some rough calculations, and we figured out we'd maybe reached 0.5% of the workforce out there. And we knew we wanted to reach more than that. We really wanted to fundamentally transform this workforce, to professionalize this workforce. And at the rate we were going, we just weren't going to get there. So if chopping that portfolio in half had been helpful, we decided, well, why don't we chop it up into even smaller pieces? Let's take all those portfolio components that we required, and let's have them submitted individually, and let's issue an electronic badge when each of those components come in. And so that was the birth of the E-Badge Academy. And we've been offering that since January 2019, and it's available. Your organization can purchase a subscription to the E-Badge Academy, and DSPs can work through the E-Badge Academy toward a national certification.
So Dan, this is probably a good spot for me to jump in.
Yes.
I started my position as the Director of Credentialing in December and spent the first month learning all about the portfolio process, because that is what we were in the process of using. About a month into my position is when you guys announced, you know what, this is what the direction that we're going. It's another opportunity for you. It was obviously a choice. We could continue on the portfolio part, or we could look at this and, for many of the reasons that you just suggested, too few people were taking advantage of it. The challenges of getting them through it was at times overwhelming. And so we decided to fully embrace the E-Badge Academy here at Black Hills Works. And of course, there's been some learning along the way, but we're really impressed with the way that it has broken down and focuses on those competencies and the ethics in a way that's manageable, and it allows for a lot of success with our DSPs.
Yeah, and for the benefit of our listeners, Black Hills Works was the very first organization to purchase an E-Badge Academy subscription. So you all are hearing from an expert. There is no one in the country with more experience implementing the E-Badge Academy than Tanya Fritz from Black Hills Works.
Well, and we had the first person to get their DSP too, so I got to brag about that through the E-Badge Academy.
Absolutely.
Pretty cool stuff.
So both of these programs require that DSPs complete accredited training hours. And not every training that's out there is NADSP accredited. It's a process that these programs have to go through to become NADSP accredited. And, it's another question I get frequently is, this training I went to was really good. Is it accredited? Well, if they haven't applied for accreditation, then no, it isn't. And our accreditation process really does focus on the big picture, focuses on how these programs can teach every competency area and cover every aspect of our code of ethics. So it really is designed for a big curriculum that covers the big picture, not just maybe a 1 hour training that might be very valuable, but isn't really focused on that larger picture of direct support. So here is the list. If you are currently using any of these training programs, they are accredited, and those hours do count toward a national certification. So Tanya, do you want to talk real quick about how you do this at Black Hills Works?
Yeah, so one of the things that was nice about the transition is, although they do all need to be accredited hours, there isn't that limitation of it had to been within the last year or any time frame like that. So we currently use Open Future Learning and have had a lot of success with that. We use it as part of our onboarding process. So some of our new staff are already racking up hours to put towards that 50-hour badge before they even know what the E-Badge is. But we also are able to utilize hours through Relias. We, in the past, had utilized them, but we also see a lot of our DSPs coming from other organizations that have that Relias training. So one of the cool things is you don't have to start all over every time, right? If you've had this training in the past, it was good quality training. We don't say, yeah, but you didn't do it in our building, so it doesn't count. We're able to get those training records validated and recognize them for the hard work they've been doing, often for many, many years.
Yeah, and I think we should acknowledge that scenario where you have to start all over again is something that happens to DSPs all over the country. When they change jobs. And if your training hours are NADSP accredited, whether you got them with your current employer, a previous employer, and maybe you've got, a little from column A, a little from column B, as long as you've got 50 accredited hours, you've met one of the requirements for the DSP1 certification through the E-Badge Academy. So both programs use these accredited training hours. In the E-Badge Academy, there are badges you earn for completing accredited training hours. There's a badge for having 10 hours of accredited education. There's another badge for having 25. Then there's that all-important 50-hour badge that Tanya referenced. The 50-hour badge is a requirement for DSP1 certification. And those are cumulative totals. So you can earn your 10-hour badge once you have 10 hours. You earn 15 additional hours. That would be 25 hours total. Now you're ready to apply for the 25-hour badge. And when you go 25 hours beyond that, you would have those 50 hours you need for DSP1. In the portfolio-based program, one of the required elements of the portfolio was to include your NADSP accredited training records. And so that was just one component of the portfolio. We were looking at training records as part of that overall portfolio review process.
Well, I think agencies will handle it. Oh, sorry, Dan. I was just going to say, agencies are going to handle it differently. You can really have your DSPs do this pretty independently. Here at Black Hills Works, we've incorporated it into some other stuff that we're doing. So, we've created some forms where we can help track for them. Have you met your 50 hours, your 75 hours, wherever they're at? And it really just kind of helps them to have the benchmarks where they're going and keep them on a good pace.
Yes, and I've seen those forms, and they're very helpful for us as reviewers as well. To know that it's all organized in a way that's clear to the DSP, but it's also really clear when you're a badge reviewer that gets that information. So I was saying we do count the hours a little differently in the two programs. So in the E-Badge Academy for DSP1 status, we do require 50 hours of accredited education. And in the E-Badge Academy, that has to be 50 hours of direct instruction. 50 hours cumulative in your Open Future Learning, in your Relias training, in your College of Direct Support, in your PADS training if you happen to be in an area that offers that option, such as the state of Ohio. In the portfolio-based program, We require 100 hours at DSP1, but the way we count the hours is different. We allow both direct and what we call indirect instruction. So the direct instruction is the same thing. It's your time in that accredited curriculum, completing those courses, in Relias, in Open Future Learning, in the College of Direct Support, in whatever other accredited program you're using. But we also allowed indirect hours, and those were things like meeting with a mentor, meeting with a cohort of other DSPs that are working on this portfolio as well. We also allowed for discussion, so maybe you completed a module online about supporting communication more effectively. And then you get together with, a supervisor or some other DSPs or a mentor, and you have a discussion about how you can take that information and apply it in your work at your organization. So the hours in the portfolio-based program look like more, but we're just tracking things a little differently. Those discussions, those cohort meetings, those mentor meetings. Those are all still things that are helpful, no matter whether you're doing the E-Badge Academy or the portfolio-based program. We're just not in the E-Badge Academy requiring you to track them and document them in the same way.
And Dan, that's
Tanya,
important. Yeah, that's an important piece, because if we do have any folks listening today who might be doing the portfolio and then switching over to E-Badge, I guarantee that they're going to hear from some of their DSPs. Well, what does that mean about all those other hours? Were those just a waste? And really helping them to understand that you didn't lose those hours. Those are really critical development hours. Here at Black Hills Works, we put those towards another level of credentialing that we do. But regardless, recognizing that, you're still going to do the 50 hours of direct, but the time that you're spending on E-Badge doesn't have to be tracked. The time that you're doing your work samples doesn't have to be tracked. So it's all valuable information, but you will get some grumbling about, well, what about those other hours that don't count?
Yeah. And I guess that's the other thing to talk about is that portfolio just took a lot of time to put together. There were a lot of extra hours that were necessary just because the process it was very labor intensive. And the E-Badge Academy, we try to make each badge submission process take about 15 minutes. The work that you're doing may take longer than that. Your accredited education, if you're doing a 50-hour badge submission, that's 50 hours of training you've completed. But that process of getting your records and uploading them and submitting them, we're hoping that's about a 15-minute process. If you are supporting someone, to more effectively communicate and more easily communicate, that's work that might take you months. But we're hoping that telling us about it and submitting it will be about a 15-minute process. And then it's very similar at the DSP2 level, right? So in the E-Badge Academy, it requires 100 hours of direct instruction. In the portfolio-based program, it requires twice as much, 200 hours, but of course that's both direct and indirect instruction, so it's counted differently. And skills, we believe in knowledge, skills, and values. We believe that the NADSP competencies, the 15 NADSP competency areas, do a really good job of illustrating the skills that are important in direct support work. And these are our competencies, and again, they're really near and dear to our heart. We feel like they're a really excellent resource for anyone out there that's looking to evaluate how direct support professionals do their work. But we did have to make a change in the E-Badge Academy because CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, came out with their own competency set. And if you're involved with the finances of your organization, probably you're very familiar with CMS as the source of a great deal of the money that funds home and community-based services in this country. So when our primary funder comes out with a set of competencies, I think it's a good idea for all of us to pay attention. And we wanted the E-Badge Academy to be a way to demonstrate that DSPs were meeting the standards that were set up not just by NADSP, but also by CMS, by this branch of the federal government. So they consolidated theirs a little bit. They only have 12 areas instead of 15. They also wrote their competencies in a way that they are designed to be cross-sector. They're designed to apply equally well to any kind of human service setting. And we know this about DSPs. We know many DSPs work multiple jobs, and often they work multiple human service jobs. They might work weekends at a nursing home while working, evenings at a group home, and at the same time, I don't know, maybe there's a third job where they're supporting people who have, behavioral health needs. So it does make sense, I think, to have a set of competencies that apply to all those different types of human services, so that DSPs can draw on those same set of skills regardless of where they're working. And whichever competency set you look at, the structure is more or less the same. There's some overall competency language for each of these areas that describes in general what we mean by this competency. And then there are these bullet points underneath that, and we call those skill statements. And if you're familiar with the portfolio-based program, you might remember that each work sample that was submitted in your portfolio was required to demonstrate at least 2 skill statements from the selected competency area. In the E-Badge Academy, each badge represents a single skill statement. So when you do the math on this and you look at how many skill statements are required for a certification, the E-Badge Academy actually requires more. In the E-Badge Academy, to get DSP 1, you would have to demonstrate a minimum of 10 skill statements. At least 10 of your badges are going to come from a demonstration of your skills, and each of those 10 badges is going to represent a different skill statement. In the portfolio-based program, we required 4 work samples. Each work sample had to represent at least 2 skill statements. So you do the math, and that's 8 skill statements in a DSP 1 portfolio. And I think this is an important consideration because I know when you talk to DSPs who have experienced, and Tanya, you can fill us in on this as well. When you talk to DSPs who've experienced both programs, they do often have the impression that the E-Badge Academy is easier, but it is no less rigorous. The demonstration of skill is just as robust as it was in the portfolio. Is that something you've seen, Tanya, that idea that the E-Badge Academy is a little easier than the portfolio?
Definitely. I'm really glad you have this slide in here because it really highlights how you're actually demonstrating more of the skill statements through the E-Badge. I would say not only our DSPs, but a lot of leadership who had watched DSPs go through the process in the portfolio really had some concerns that this was going to be watered down or it was just too easy. And I like to use the word simple. It is simple, but it's not easy. It's still, like you said, that rigorous component. The fact that they end up taking 10 different experiences and fitting it in with these competencies and tying it into the values. If you put those all together into one portfolio, I truly think that it shows a broader version of their skills and what they've accomplished. So we have not found it to be too easy at all, but definitely geared more towards success and simpler to manage.
Yeah, and I think what it probably comes down to is that we at NADSP have gotten smarter about how we design the program. I mean, that portfolio program goes all the way back to 2007. And at the time it was designed, no one had ever seen a DSP portfolio before. No one had experienced that process of putting one together. And, as we've reviewed portfolios over the years, as we've heard from DSPs about what this experience was like for them, I think we found a way in the E-Badge Academy to get at what was really important to us, but do it in a way that was more workable for most DSPs out there. DSPs are very busy people, and to ask them to set aside 12 months of their life to develop this portfolio, that's a little difficult. But to ask them to set aside 15 minutes to describe some of their work, to upload some training records, to do it in those little bite-sized chunks, I think is much more effective and much more approachable.
Well, and it's also an improved way of giving feedback. The skill statements, doing the badges allows for all these little micro corrections along the way to help people to better understand how to write up their work sample so it's addressing the competency, how to tie those values in. And they can put in a badge, and I'm sure you'll get to this, but when they get their feedback, I actually enjoy it when sometimes they get denied, because you don't learn a lot if you're not making some mistakes and growing along the way. And with the e-badges, they get their feedback, they read it, and they're able to just go forward, maybe even that same day. Whereas I've watched people who've put, like you said, maybe a year into this portfolio, and when they get it back, you got to dig deep to fix those mistakes and keep moving forward. It's nice to get the little micro corrections along the way.
And as someone who's reviewed those portfolios, I mean, sometimes those portfolios were denied, and really it came down to just a misunderstanding about what we were looking for. It wasn't that they were a bad DSP at all. I mean, we don't really get bad DSPs that want to spend a year developing a portfolio, but sometimes there was some confusion. And to be able to correct that immediately rather than a year and 3 months later is, I think, a much better design. Just real quick, at the DSP 2 level, we continue to see that rigor is at least what we have in the portfolio-based program. It's at least 22 skill statements in the E-Badge Academy, whereas in the portfolio-based program, it would be 4 more work samples, which would mean at least 8 more skill statements for 16 skill statements total. And, one of our goals with this E-Badge Academy is to have DSPs be much more aware of their skills. DSPs have skills, and in my experience, they don't always give themselves a lot of credit for the skills that they have, that they use every day. And we're hoping by having this visual of the badge that it allows DSPs to sort of take some ownership of those skills. When I go out and do training for supervisors, one of the things I really try to encourage is that when you evaluate DSPs, when you're even just informally praising DSPs, you want to do it as much as possible based on skills. I do think we sometimes have a tendency in human services, when we praise DSPs, to praise them for things like good attendance. I mean, you want a DSP who does actually show up for work. I understand that. We also tend to praise DSPs for personality traits. Oh, you're so patient. You're just so wonderful and patient with the people. I just really, really appreciate that. And I think if you look a little deeper, when you have a DSP that is doing good work, what you're really seeing is skills. And as much as possible, we want to point out those skills. And that's what we're trying to do in the E-Badge Academy, is give DSPs credit for the skills that they're demonstrating.
Well, and we found that it's helpful for them to just, frame the work they do in that competency language. It's professional language, and in just using the correct words, you end up changing the perception of the job. Many of our DSPs are supporting individuals maybe to a doctor's appointment, and they need to be able to feel confident and comfortable communicating. And I've really seen that as they recognize that they are professionals with skills, it gives them the confidence to do their job in a lot of different settings.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the benefits we're hoping for. So I'm glad that you're seeing that. Tanya, this is something you touched on earlier, kind of the evaluation process and how it's constant. Every single badge is reviewed as it comes in. Whereas in the portfolio-based process, we were doing it, when the portfolio was finished, which was, often a year later. An individual badge submission, our commitment is to get it reviewed within 3 business days. And we do a pretty good job of that. Every once in a while, we might have one that goes beyond that. But we do a pretty good job of reviewing each and every badge submission within 3 business days, which is so much better than the amount of time it takes to review a portfolio. A portfolio review is very intensive, and it does take us about 90 days in a lot of cases to get back to the DSP with that feedback. Now, there is a difference in the level of feedback. Again, in that portfolio-based program, it was really, really a lot of feedback, maybe sometimes more feedback than the DSP might have wanted. In the E-Badge Academy, if you're approved for the badge, all you're going to know is that you're approved. You get that thumbs up. Yes, you're approved. If we cannot approve your badge submission, then you will be given a reason why. And there are 4 different types of reasons it might be. It might, be an issue with not meeting the skill statement. There are 2 prompts for every badge, 2 kind of questions we ask the DSP to answer. And if you don't answer one of those 2 prompts, don't address one of those 2 prompts, we would have to deny the badge. And then we would deny the badge if we saw anything that wasn't consistent with the Code of Ethics. For example, if you're discussing a person by name and you don't make it absolutely clear that this is not their real name, that you are protecting their confidentiality and are not using their real name, that would be a reason why we would have to deny a badge, for not showing that you're respecting confidentiality, which is a part of our Code of Ethics. So it's a different level of feedback, but it's much more frequent. And as Tanya mentioned earlier, I think we're seeing the benefits of that, of giving that feedback throughout the process rather than at the end of the process. Did you have anything more on? Yeah.
Yeah,
go ahead, Tanya.
it hits home so much better. The feedback was really thorough and helpful with those portfolios, and it helped to guide that future behavior. However, it often was, at least 3 months, but sometimes much longer because, the individual had been working on their work sample for so long. So by the time they got the feedback, you can imagine getting feedback for something maybe that you'd done a half a year or 9 months prior. In this world, people move, they get different positions, things happen, and that feedback just wasn't even really resonating anymore. Whereas with the e-badges, getting that feedback, it's like they're able to make those adjustments and changes and in real time.
And again, in many cases, it's not that they're doing something wrong. It's that maybe they misunderstood what we were looking for.
Yes. So there's a learning curve. I would say, I always let our DSPs know that, it's okay. Those first few badges, you're probably going to get some denials coming back at a rate that you're not super comfortable with, but it's part of just learning the process and then understanding the way that you need to frame it and write it up. It's not a reflection of you as a DSP. It's a reflection on the information that you're sharing. And then once they kind of get the hang of it and they get in the groove, then you really see the frequency of the feedback being, they're just passing them at a much higher rate.
Yeah, and when you're an e-badge reviewer, as you are, Tanya, you know that you only know what is in the submission. You don't know this person. You don't know what an awesome DSP they are. You don't have all this background information, and sometimes little details get left out that you just assume everyone takes for granted. But if it's not there in black and white in the submission, we may not be able to approve it because we don't know that happened unless you tell us.
And Dan, we see that a lot, the kind of the shortcut in the writing, and what gets lost very often is the empowerment component. And, in taking the shortcuts and how they write it up, they neglect to talk about how the individual was, consulted on each level and drove the process and was giving the, so I think that would happen in a portfolio, and that's a really big deal because you got to start all over. If it happens in the e-badge, it's like, oh, I meant to explain that. I'm sorry. And then you just add a couple sentences and it's all clear.
Yeah, and if you're in an organizational culture that really, really believes in that, as I think Black Hills Works has, then you might take it for granted. Well, of course I involve this person every step of the way in all of these decisions. But if you don't actually put that in your submission, the reviewer doesn't know that. So yeah, that's a very frequent issue that we run into, just that little piece of missing information. All right, and let's touch on that code of ethics. NADSP has this code of ethics. If you're not familiar with it, I would encourage you to read it, especially I would say the preamble. The preamble, I think, does a really good job of illustrating the values of this profession and how NADSP sees this profession of direct support. So to compare the two programs, one of the things that we wanted to do in the E-Badge Academy is really encourage DSPs to get comfortable with that code of ethics. Now, in both programs, there is sort of this moment where you agree to follow the code of ethics. There's a form you sign as part of your portfolio that, yes, I will provide services in line with this code of ethics. In the E-Badge Academy, we have an initial badge called the Code of Ethics Commitment, where it's sort of you electronically do the same thing. Yes, I do agree to provide services in line with this code of ethics. And I think that's something that's fairly common in our field, right? That read and sign document. DSPs are very familiar with a document they need to read and sign. In the E-Badge Academy, what we tried to do is really continually get that DSP to refer to the code of ethics, to reflect on it, to make connections between the work they were doing day to day and the language that was in that code of ethics. So we do always have two prompts. The second prompt is always about values, and probably about half the time it's asking the DSP to make a connection directly to the code of ethics. And our hope is that as they do that, which more and more badge submissions, that it sort of becomes a habit, that they get used to going to that code, thinking about that code, applying that code to their work, so that we hope in the future, even when they're not submitting a badge, that's something they're just doing naturally. Tanya, how's that process been at Black Hills Works?
I would say that the integration of the Code of Ethics is one of my favorite parts of the E-Badge Academy. It's been one of the most meaningful components. We make sure everybody's got the full code, and then they also want the bookmarks. They want it, and they're reflecting on it on a regular basis. Because, there's what you do, which matters, but there's how you do it, and that's probably matters more. And so that's where the Code of Ethics comes in. They'll describe what they did, and it's like, okay, why'd you do it that way? How'd you do it? How did you approach it in that ethical way? And it helps them not only in the E-Badge, but we've now regularly used Code of Ethics every day, and the dilemmas that are faced. I mean, you're constantly making a choice. We have these Code of Ethics in front of us, and you're thinking about, do I do this or do I do that? And it helps to guide those decisions. It helps to guide their conversations with coworkers if they, don't see eye to eye on a situation. How can they walk through it using the Code of Ethics? How can they go to their leadership, to their frontline leaders, and talk about something that's happened in the home and be really taken seriously? And the answer, again, is the Code of Ethics. Whenever we frame it in that language, it makes sense, and it's got more power.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you're seeing that, because that was when we were creating this thing a few years ago. That was the vision, that DSPs would have that experience, and I'm glad to hear that's what DSPs at Black Hills Works are experiencing. All right, well, we're going to wrap this up, but Tanya has a story of implementing the E-Badge Academy and a DSP earning a particular badge that I just think is an outstanding story and really illustrates how this can be helpful to a DSP, to an organization. So I'm going to turn it over to her, and then we will wrap this up.
Well, Deanne, as I mentioned, we switched over to the E-Badge Academy. So not only am I helping folks get through that and supporting them through that, I also have to continue to make sure that the agency as a whole is aware of what we're doing and why it's important. Because like I mentioned before, there was some concern that, gosh, are we going to lose something through the E-Badge? So when I have an opportunity to share some of these successes, I do, and that's how you ended up hearing about this story. But we still continue to meet as a group. So folks that are going through this, we still get together as a cohort and we talk through some stuff. And one day there was a gal in class who was kind of giving her aha moment and was talking about just, something that really could have been seen as pretty simple. She was in the kitchen. She was doing some stuff with a person supported, and she just kind of turned and said, "Hey, can you help set the table?" And the individual set the table and did it really, really well. In the past, she never had asked of that, and she didn't think that was within their skill set, and nobody was asking this individual to help set the table. And she just had that limiting belief. And so I asked her, I said, well, what made you ask today? Why did you all of a sudden say, hey, can you set the table? And she said, well, because I'm working on my meal prep badge. And then I was thinking about, what are some experiences that I can have that would be in line with that skill set? And sometimes our DSPs, they've already done something that lines up, but other times they have to challenge themselves to do something new in order to line up with one of those badges. And this was one of those moments where she wanted to do something above and beyond. And so she had that great experience. She turned in her meal prep badge. She earned it. And that's a success. But really the true success is that she's really cognizant now of some of her underestimating of others and how that was limiting other people's potential. And so, going forward, she's much more mindful of that. So it's just one of those little changes that has those big rippling impacts going forward.
Yeah, I love this story. And this was something else that we were hoping for, right? So it really makes me feel good to know that it actually worked out the way we planned it. The badge should be sort of a little extra motivation to try a new approach. And that sounds like it's exactly what happened in this case, that badge was the thing that pushed her to try something new, to try something different. And when it was successful, then that led her to I hope, to continue to try new approaches,
Yep.
And to see things a different way.
Yep, and she's made those changes herself, but she is encouraging others as well. So
that's even better. Well, thank you so much, Tanya. I think your perspective is really key as the person who has the most experience in the country with implementing this E-Badge Academy. I'm glad people could tune in and hear from you. If people have questions about the E-Badge Academy or about the traditional portfolio-based program, if that's the way you'd like to go, they can get in touch with me via email. They can go onto NADSP's website to get all sorts of information about both programs. And if you'd like to look at all the badges that are available, that is a part of the E-Badge Academy that you can see even if you don't have a current subscription. So the link there on the slide will get you into the catalog of badges and allow you to sort of take a look and see how well those badges might match up with the skills of your direct support professional. So thank you for tuning in, everybody. We're going to wrap it up now. Thank you again, Tanya.
Yes, and thank you for this opportunity and for all that NADSP does to just continue to push us to grow and get stronger.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your partnership with us. Black Hills Works has been a great supporter of NADSP over the years. So with that, we will wrap this up. Goodbye, everybody.
Good luck. Bye-bye.